afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here for our first Friday at the Collective. Woohoo! So this is the first of a series of conversations that are going to happen each Friday here at the stables, at the meat market, as part of the exhibition that we have on during July called The Collective, which is exposing, that's maybe not the right word, opening our archive of 50 years, because AAV is 50 this year, and also is including projection work from original artists or artists that have been in our archive, or their work has been in our archive, and our current artists that we work with, contemporary artists, are responding to those works, which feels pretty amazing. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we are meeting today, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nations, and pay respect to their owners, the elders past and present, and want to welcome any First Nations people that are with us today specifically. So today I am joined by this fabulous panel because this series of conversations is about the past, the present and the future. So today I am joined by past and future CEOs, and next week, which I can talk about at the end as well, we'll be meeting with some of the artists that have presented and made work as part of the exhibition, and then the final Friday will be an opportunity for some of the artists that have been involved in our youth advisory group and involved in our youth program over the last 18 months or so, coming to deliver their manifesto, the things that they dream for the next 50 years, which is very exciting. So I want to welcome everyone in the room, and I also want to welcome everyone who's joining us online. We have not forgotten about you, and we're very grateful that you are here. So without further ado, I want to introduce the fabulous panellists. I am joined to my left by Judy Morton, who was the original founder of Arts Access Victoria 50 years ago. Thank you for joining us. I'm then going to head to the end of the row and introduce Veronica Pardo, who was the CEO prior to me, and was instrumental in AAV becoming a disability-led organisation. So, and then in the centre is the new fabulous CEO of Arts Access Victoria. Taking over from me is Joshua Pether. So welcome. And for those of you that don't know me, although I feel like everybody does, I'm Caroline, and I am the exiting today CEO of AAV, and I've been in this role for the last 6 years, very proudly. So thank you. And it's a joy to be here with all of you on my final day. So, Judy, where did it all begin? And how does one start an organisation that lasts for 50 years? Did you imagine that it would?
I don't think I thought about it that much. I should say that I've had an involvement with Arts Access for something like 25 years, in the first 25 years. Arts Access basically started off as a pilot project and then a 4-year one-person project. I never really reached the heights of being an executive officer. I was more like a project officer for those first 4 years. And then I was a board member and later chair of the board up until about 1997, I think. So I've continued to watch and be involved in less away since. So starting an organisation, well, I don't know that I thought, I mean, Arts Access started very much as a 6-month pilot project. And I think I always thought that, I would spend a couple of years and I would establish it as a project, as an organisation. I'm not sure that I had a totally conscious strategy, but I guess I would say in starting an organisation, I think there are 3 things, and I think this goes for any arts organisations, or any arts organisations, and of course Arts Access in particular. I think the first thing you have to establish is that there's a need for what you're doing, and not only that, but that the organisation that you're going to establish is the organisation that will be able to meet those needs, to deliver those needs. And I guess I'd say, the first 4 years of Arts Access, I reckon, delivered that really well. We had great programs. We had great involvement. We had people engaged. And I think there was an absolute need for our programs and activities, and the programs and activities that we facilitated or delivered or whatever were really, really effective in transforming people, those people who are involved as participants or involved as artists, or the arts organisations that were providing some resources to us. The second thing I think you need to establish an organisation is a sound financial base. And I'm sure we can talk about that a bit more later. I'd have to say I didn't do so well there. Arts Access was quite a radical new idea, and we got a lot of support from the Australia Council and from philanthropic trusts and so on, but we really didn't get into Victorian government funding, which is what I think we really needed to do to keep us, to provide that kind of financial stability. I think everyone thought it was a great idea, but the arts lot said, oh no, this is really welfare, community services or something. And the community welfare sector said, oh no, this is really arts. So anyway, I'll leave that in abeyance. I think the third thing you need to think about is organisational structure. You need a structure, and I think in the first 4 years we didn't have that formal structure. We were hosted by a couple of organisations like VCOS and the Victorian Council of the Arts, who were fantastic. And towards, I suppose in the 3rd or 4th year of the project, I gathered together a committee of, well, not quite management, but being one person, it was really kind of, I don't know, it wasn't quite formalised, but I'd have to say, I think after my time as a project officer, I think the establishment of Arts Access as a formal organisation was a really key development, and Arts Access was formally constituted in 1979, and I think that was a really key moment.
Amazing. Thanks, Judy. Obviously, when we look at Arts Access as it is now, it's evolved a lot in 50 years. It's changed. We know that AAV started in prisons, and it started based in institutions and in hospitals, and doing mega projects like we see in some of the in some of the work that we're seeing in this exhibition. I'm really interested Veronica, you were CEO for 9 years prior to me, and I'm really interested in what changes did you see? I mean, it's so interesting to hear Judy talk about how it wasn't connected to state government, whereas I feel like now AAV is so very supported by Creative Victoria. And I imagine that there was lots of people that were instrumental in that, but you also really helped those relationships to develop. So what significant changes happened on your watch, would you say? What's happened in the landscape?
Well, I really love that Judy has said that the organisation was radical, because I think we did very radical work during that decade, which was very much about, I think, look, the time before I arrived was really a time of stabilising for the organisation, for many arts organisations during those early 2000s. But when I arrived, there was a real need and opportunity to look outwards and connect the work of the organisation to the broader disability rights movements. So really politicising the organisation by understanding what was its power. And I think it was my sense was that it was a little bit of an underestimated organisation, and disability arts generally was an underestimated field. And so there was enormous scope to start to agitate around that, and to suggest that actually we were supporting a cohort of artists that had very important things to say about our society. And I think government began to understand that this wasn't some kind of niche, nice thing to do, a nice, Friday afternoon activity, but actually something quite essential that was missing from the cultural landscape, which was these very incredible, diverse and powerful voices telling stories that were not really understood or heard in our society. And so I think that was the big change, and really suggesting to government that they had neglected this sector for a really long time, and that in fact, if they were to uphold cultural rights, that needed to include everybody. They needed to include all voices and all stories. And I think where things really shifted during that time was that kind of understanding about participation and everyone being included, to this idea that actually this idea of equity, that we're not just asking for the same as everybody else, that actually this needs more investment. So that's the premise that we took to government, was not, treat us the same as everybody else. Actually, we want you to invest more here, because that's how you get equity, by giving people what they need. And this sector needed to be really supported, to address the decades of kind of, lack of investment. And that's what happened. And I think, what was exciting about it was that it didn't come from this paucity mentality or scarcity, this idea of, we as supplicants coming begging. No, it came from a position of strength and a sense of this is what this sector is worthy of and demands. And I think actually it hit a good note. Government and other funders and supporters were really receptive of the idea that we were seeking, well, in our own way, we were seeking self-determination, because it was very much about the artist's voice at the heart of all of our planning and advocacy. So that's probably what I'd say was the legacy for that period. And then let's not talk about NDIS, which was the end of that period.
No, and it continues. It continues. There's so much in what you just said, but I think one of the things that was this idea of cultural equity has been a vision for AAV that definitely has developed or become more articulated in the time that I've been there. And Josh and I were having a conversation yesterday when we realised that, I don't know how many of you were here on Friday night for the opening of the exhibition, but we had a moment yesterday where I kind of went, holy shit, we did it. There was a moment where there were 250 people in this room and a real sense of cultural equity. There was a sense of we all belonged here, everyone felt safe here, everyone felt valued and valuable, and that this was a space that they could have ownership and power in. And it was extraordinary to have that realization yesterday, to just kind of go, oh God, what do we do now? We know there's so much more to do, because we know that at the heart of AAV, the artists have always been there. Commitment to access and equity has always been there. Justice has always been there. And I think, Josh, I wonder, one of the things that's been emerging for us in the last couple of days is this conversation about recognition of our culture as disabled people, as we know that there's a really super strong deaf culture, but also how unrecognised the disability community's culture is in many contexts, including in an artistic context.
Yes, that's a really...
I think just hold on, I'll turn it up.
Yeah. Yes, that's a really good point. I think people don't realise that disability has its own culture, and it's actually a significant sort of cultural sort of milestone in many cases, especially in the UK, where most of that sort of arrived at. And if we look at it from that perspective, then really we should be putting more funds into this sector. I think about, like, as a First Nations person, I'm Kalkadoon, that's where my mob is, so Central Queensland, how I was seeing that sort of, that sector, and particularly I suppose the dance sector, which is where I sort of was witness to the developments there, where we were having very similar conversations that we're having today about, like, you know, like, include us. And so from there, how they've managed to now go from that to then having artists programmed in all sorts of festivals, just basically self-determination, which I think is missing a lot in the disability community, that level of self-determination and being able to determine your own future without any sort of assistance in that manner. And if you look at it from a cultural perspective, if you have it as a culturally sort of significant sort of part of society, usually people will generally let go of the reins and let you drive the car, so to speak. So I think, like, to look at disability, that's probably one of the big things I feel as the new CEO that I'll bring forward into the new vision, is just to sort of make awareness that disability is a culture and it needs to be considered as such. And that if you consider that to be a culture, then you do need to then allow self-determination to take place and to eventually give the reins up.
And I think that's so exciting. And I think we are seeing some of that more at the moment. So with the new development of the new creative state, AAV's been sought out as a kind of to bring the voices of deaf and disabled artists into that space, and that's super exciting. We know with the development of the associated plan that sits along the national arts policy, there was a lot of consultation that went into that, and really that idea about co-design in a very genuine way rather than it being tokenistic. I feel like there is a moment that we're missing, or an element that we're missing in this, in that there still feels like there's a lack of disability leadership in that space. So we might consult and share our opinions and our thoughts and ideas and all of those things, but we're still, our ongoing leadership is potentially quite sporadic. So there's something I'd love to dig in a bit, Veronica, with you about, I know we've told this story a million times, and you have, around the transition and the importance of disability leadership and how AAV made that decision to make that transition. And I think it would be really interesting to hear about the significance and importance of the board in that context as well.
Well, I think, what strikes me is that we have been talking about our transition for a really long time, like 6 years since you've come. And I just don't understand why we're still talking about this one example of a leadership transition towards a more self-determined way of working and an opportunity for diverse people to lead their own organisations. Why is this such an exception still? Why is that not... I don't know why other organisations have not taken up the charge. It really concerns me that also in the disability sector there hasn't been a broader conversation about this, let alone in the kind of mainstream sector. But, you know, our conversation, I think what it reflected was an organisation of its time that was deeply engaged with the matters that concerned the community that it served. And that community brought to it the desire for the organisation to be disability-led, and that's how we responded. And not to forget that at the time we were led by Leslie Hall, the amazing Leslie Hall, who's sadly no longer with us, but one of the fiercest disability advocates that I've ever met, an incredible woman, scary, could really confront them, you know, at the minister's office and just eyeball the minister and tell him what's what. She was unbelievably powerful in her convictions, her capacity to communicate from this perspective of power and strength. And so that did not come as a jolting kind of moment. It came as this is absolutely fair and reasonable. Let's make it happen. But what we also wanted was to disrupt the pattern that existed in the community sector of disabled people getting hold of organisations when they were on their knees. You know, so when the organisation's broken, that's when we have the disabled leader. So we can prove we tried that, didn't work. We wanted to hand over an organisation that was at its best. And I think we did that. It was financially strong, reputationally strong. It had incredible connections, and the artists were so visible as a presence in the organisation. So those were some of the things that we kind of intervened in. And that vision came from the incredible Leslie Hall and Margarita Coppolino and Brad Sadler and myself and people like Fiona and Nikki and Fiona back here and, you know, and Paul Dunn, I want to mention all these people only because it was a team of incredible thinkers and dedicated people who knew that this organisation was just gold. And in the hands of a disabled leader, there could be no better trajectory for the organisation. And that's what we knew, and that's what we manifested. And it was easy, actually, because there was a lot of will for it. And then you came along, and then we had we decided between us, let's do this with style and grace and generosity for one another. It's never been about handing anything over. It's always been about friendship and care and what it takes to make change in a society that is just so deeply violent. How do we actually utilise our strengths? And so for me, I never found it hard. I always just found it a joy. Everything associated with Arts Access for me has been a joy, and the icing on the cake was, you know, to hand it over to a disabled leader to lead in this way. And for it to actually be known in the sector and more broadly as the organisation to watch.
Yeah. Feel free to jump in, lovely panellists. Don't wait for me to introduce you.
I'd just like to say something about the early days, because I think the disability-led thing is really important, and it was. I mean, when we were established, it was really the threshold of the disability rights movement. But one of the things that I really wanted to see, and one thing that really inspired me and my involvement, was the idea that the disability sector, not just the disability sector, but the whole broader community and welfare sector, should see that arts and creativity was absolutely central to everyone's life. And I think, you know, in those days we had things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, basic human needs. And, you know, the arts didn't really feature in that. And I think that was I think the centrality of arts and creativity to Arts Access and the work of Arts Access is certainly a kind of continuing theme and resource and things that I think is very, very important.
Yeah, and we know that arts and culture is, in fact, a human right, and that's and it's so significant, and we know the significance that it has to all of our lives and also to the lives of the artists that we have the privilege of supporting on their artistic journey. So many things. I want to go to this idea. I love that you've talked about AAV as gold, because I think it is, and I also think it's a little bit magical. But the thing that I try to say to people all the time when we talk about inclusive practice or how do we do this or whatever is, it's actually not about having magical powers. I am not a magician. But we, the other day, realised this beautiful thing about there is a vein of that runs through AAV that is this idea about it's embedded in its foundations is this this vein of that the organisation revolves around kindness and around care in the best possible way, and essentially around love. And that feels like something that is really hard to articulate or to put our fingers on, but is absolutely part of what we do and how we shape things. And I just wondered if are there other, I mean, how does that come? How does that emerge? How do we articulate that? And is that something that makes part of the magic and the gold?
Yes. I don't know how you articulate it, but I think one of the really interesting things is, because of my very long experience with Arts Access, is that people who participate or participated in Arts Access at whatever role or something, I think once you were touched by Arts Access, it was really a transforming experience. I mean, the love lasts. I think people fell in love with, I mean, there's so many people that, you know, from the Arts Access board and staff and so on, who, if you asked them, would still have very warm and affectionate feelings. But I think we fell in love, and I think we stayed in love. I don't know how you get it, but we've got it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, you know, when I started at Arts Access and I'd get out in the sectors, I didn't come from the arts, so I didn't know much about the arts world. So I'd go out and meet people, and everyone would say to me, "Oh, I used to work at Arts Access, and I used to work at Arts Access." And I used to say, I would say often, Arts Access trained the sector. Arts Access actually trained our sector. People got their grounding in practice at Arts Access in community arts and cultural development. But there is something, you know, like I've worked in lots of organisations, and now I work in hundreds of them. And I can tell you that you don't have a culture like that for nothing. It doesn't come out of nothing. It comes out of a deep respect for the human dignity and the dignity of I think, you know, disabled people recognising that they absolutely have a right not only to cultural practice but to visibility in our society, and to be able to participate in creating lives of their own making. And that's what Arts Access does, and it's why it attracts people that are not just kind but driven and passionate about this work. And, you know, I always say, and I think I will go to my deathbed saying, that Arts Access was my favourite workplace. I loved my colleagues and the artists that we work with so much. I don't recall, and perhaps this has gone in the haze of memory, right, but I don't recall a bad experience there. And that's hard to say in an organisational context today, I have to say, where there's just so much conflict everywhere. But there was a place for negotiating really difficult things like power, like control, like decision making, but in a way that was done just with grace and a sense of there are people in the room and this matters to those people. And I think Arts Access could teach the whole sector how to be, how to work from this place of grace.
I'd have to say also in regards to that, just coming from an artist perspective, that one of the things I've noticed is that we work with artists that have nothing to lose in many ways. They're willing to give as much as they can give for the opportunities that they get. And sometimes when you have an artist like that, their vision, their direction, whatever they achieve is beyond the capabilities of what you are given when you have resources. And so when you have when you have a little, you are able to dream big and able to go beyond the boundaries of what you're capable of. And I think this is one of the things that I really love about this sector particularly, is the invention, is the innovation. It's nothing I've ever seen before. We talk about experimental practice and so forth, but to me, the disability sector is the nexus of experimental practice. It really is the pinnacle of it. You cannot achieve some of the things in an able-bodied that you can achieve with disability, and it's something it's really, really true to this sector. And we just need a change in the way that we look at work, and that's seeing that work that is being created by people with disabilities is something that is unique. You're never going to get the same work. You're never going to get the same aesthetic. You're never going to get the same amount of skill. So that to me is really exciting, that if we can imagine that and tell governments that this is what you need to invest in, then you'll get amazing experimental work in Australia.
So true. It's always been an ongoing challenge or an ongoing conversation, particularly in the mainstream dance world, is dancers get swapped in and out all the time. Dancers come and go. And so a dancer will learn someone else's moves and then they'll dance the dance of that person, and it's like, oh, unless you're a disabled dancer, and then it's like, that movement is so unique to your body that no one else is going to do it or be able to do it. We're going to have to make another version. And it's like, absolutely. If only we gave everybody that opportunity to go, what's the dance of your body, rather than what's the do that dance. It's really interesting, and I absolutely agree with you. We know this incredibly well, that deaf and disabled people are the most innovative lateral thinkers that you will ever meet, because we are constantly having to navigate the world and try and make it work for us in a way that it was never built for us, or wasn't ever thinking about the fact that we'd be part of it. So we've had to come up with all of that brilliance. And it's really interesting, isn't it, because we can invite people into that anytime. And people are really welcome to come, and I feel like that's one of the things that I've done over the 6 years, is really invite people in. It's like, is this scary? Are you scared? Are you worried about this? Is this a place of fear? It's not for us. So just come and we'll work with you and we'll do it together. And it's been amazing at how some people will absolutely grab at that and say, yes, this is what we want to do, and others will just kind of go, maybe we'll do it next year. And it's like, okay, that's okay. We can do that. What surprised us about AAV? What surprised us over the time that we have known of it? What stayed with us?
I'll jump in just quickly. I think one of the things that really surprised me is just how successful we are. Have been, were, still are, will be. I mean, it's an amazing place, I think, for talent to kind of blossom in, and it really is quite amazing that I mean, people come in with skills, but I think the organisation enables this kind of blossoming, and I think I don't know that I ever thought of that when I first started, but it is something that continues to surprise and very much please me.
I think the thing that I suppose just coming into as a new CEO, what surprises me most is the atmosphere you feel when you step into the office is just very calming. It's very holistic. It feels like, and I think this is one of the things I noticed when I was a visitor back, a few years back as well. Just that level of, collaboration, also just the real harmony that you find in that space. And in comparison to other places that you visit, there's just not that level at all. And so for me, there's a sense of I think we talk back to the idea of that golden thread. I almost feel that a golden thread's been wound around that office and has been cemented in there. But yeah, I think that's the one thing I've noticed the most is just the level of harmony and communion that exists in that particular part of the area that we're in. Yeah.
What surprises me is that there is any resistance, and there still is resistance to this practice, to these communities. I'm just gobsmacked at the bozos in the arts who just don't want a part of arts access and this work. I don't understand why anybody wouldn't want to partner with these artists to create work that is more relevant, more meaningful, more impactful than anything that they would do. I'm still staggered by that. And thankfully, it's less and less today. I think we've tipped the scale over, not arts access, the entire arts and disability sector. And I want to really do a shout out to all of the amazing colleagues in the sector, amazing, artists and companies who've been doing this work. It's definitely tipped over, right? And so, but still, you sometimes get this kind of glazed look when you're talking to organisations about how they need to change, how their practices need to change, and you get that look and you just think, no, you're not where you need to be. And that surprises me, because I just think that, as we look at our cultural sector and the products of our cultural sector, surely everyone can see that the experience of disability is universal and something that needs to be deeply understood within our kind of human condition. I can't understand why these stories are not everywhere. I think, that's, like we were talking the other day about what's the work still to be done. And for me, that's the work still to be done, because I'm not sure that everyone is with us. I'm not sure that everyone's got the message. And also we can lose things as well. That's the other NDIS lovely learning, is that we can have things and we can lose them. And so, we have to be together as a sector, all of us, allies as well, because that's what it's going to require to keep the gains that we've made and to make more gains, which is what is the aspiration.
I think what surprised me has been actually looking back at the archive and just seeing the incredible work that's been made over the years that I had no idea about, even though I'd been connected with AAV for a really long time. And I realised that I was very familiar with my corner of the world, but I had no concept of the huge breadth of the work that AAV has done over the years, and that surprised me in that immediacy. I think I'm with you, Veronica. I'm surprised that, we get a lot of approaches. There's only so much capacity that AAV has. And we are being asked more and more to engage, to collaborate, to partner, to do all of those things, which is brilliant. But yeah, it's that there's still others that don't want to play, and yeah, so there's still lots of work to be done. I would love to throw this conversation open to our lovely people in the audience. I don't know whether we can get comments from people online. Can we do that? Maybe not. But people in the room that might have questions, thoughts, comments, memories, do we have a microphone that can be moved around to people in the audience? Okay, so I will repeat the question, if that's okay, unless you want to come up, Samsara, and speak into this microphone. Do you want to just say it and then I'll say it back? Great.
So my question is to Josh, but then beyond perhaps. You talk about the culture, like that the sector is a culture, and I was just wondering if you could expand on that and why it sits there as well as a sector.
Yeah, I think
Repeat the question. So the question was around the culture and why it sits separately, almost as a genre, but also as a culture. Is that true? No.
Why it is a culture as opposed to a genre?
Yeah. Why is it a culture as opposed to a genre?
That's a good question. I think the idea of culture comes a lot from different ethnicities, races, and I think it sort of stems from that sort of theory and ideology and such. But within this space, there are customs, there's practices, there's ways of working, there's ways of learning, there's ways of being that are very specific to disability that I would consider to be part of the cultural significant sort of practice. And that when you start to engage in that talk, there comes a time when people understand that this is really not something that I know about, and so therefore I need to then step aside and let the people that know about this to decide on this, and that's where self-determination comes into place. And as I said before, I saw this particularly in the First Nations dance sector, where we were sort of seen, I suppose, as a bespoke sort of thing that we offered to people. And then over time, this sort of cultural renaissance, the understanding what culture is, it's always constantly evolving, it's always constantly changing. That then becomes this shift where people understand it to be this culturally significant thing, and that, hey, we need to allow these people to actually start to do the work and step aside. And also we need to start programming this into our venues, because we need to become more aware of this, because it is really quite significant as part of our history as well. And I think like one of the things that I've found, because I work in the health sector as well, and not anymore, I don't know about that. We'll see, to be advised. I think one of the things also is that has also permeated into other sectors, the idea that First Nations have a culture, and that's the way that we approach that particular group community, so that we have training in regards to that, we have an understanding in regards to that. To me, that needs to happen here as well, in regards to that, as this is a culture, needs to be considered as such, and then we need to also look at it from the perspective of like we need to fund it as such.
Other questions, comments, thoughts? Michelle? I'm going to try and summarise that question, Michelle, and you can keep me right. What is stopping mainstream organisations and funding bodies seeing the joy that we could bring them. That's my summation. That wasn't it. Yeah. What are the barriers? Yeah. What are the barriers from mainstream organisations?
I'll answer this. Before, I did an actual, I suppose, project on this back in 2012 when I was in Link. And the question I proposed to sort of, I suppose, my thesis or research person was, what was the place of the disabled contemporary dancer in the contemporary dance world? And for me, I looked at the idea of how sport has managed to bring disabled people into that sort of fold. But for some reason, and I specifically looked at dance because that was what I was studying, dance never was really able to capture that. And one of the things I sort of came across was the aesthetic. The aesthetic of disabled bodies is quite dangerous to the aesthetic of what we view as a performance. And particularly in a very, I suppose, what's the word? Trying to think of Australian society. You know what I mean? Look, what's that word?
To
Common.
describe Australian
Yeah.
society.
Very not
Backwards?
not
No.
bad. Yeah, backwards, but also like just conservative aspects. Particularly even back in 2012. So the idea that bodies on stage gave off a different aesthetic, particularly in regards to, as Caroline alluded before, when you're learning a dance, you would often learn that dance from that particular person that took that role. And so when you place a person with a disability in that role, that then changes the role completely. That then changes the whole production, changes the whole way that we do things. There was this almost like, oh my God, we've got to reinvent the wheel sort of thing. So I feel like that's changed slightly, but still I think it's for me personally, and I mean it could be wrong about this, but I feel like it's definitely the aesthetic choices that disabled bodies give on stage that just generally can create sense of like either, oh, that's not right, or that's going to change everything for us. Then it makes more work, I suppose, potentially.
I think you're right. I think you're spot on. But I also think that there's this, we talk about othering of disabled people, and I think that's still going on. I mean, when you talk to arts organisations, they're always talking about diverse people as if they're somewhere else. They're not here in this building, in this room, in this... And so I don't think that our arts organisations, and certainly not our institutions, have grappled with the reality of who they even are. I don't even think they realise that disabled people are amongst them. They are there. And the fact that they don't know, and the fact that they're still conceiving, their engagement with any diverse group as something, external is the problem. And why don't disabled people feel safe disclosing their disability inside institutions? Because they're not good places. And I think that's what we need to deal with, is we need to be truthful about that and recognise that the systems that operate within these, and I'm talking about the large cultural institutions predominantly, I think the small to medium sector, for all that they don't have resources, are much more committed to safe and equitable practices. But our leading organisations are not. And that's why I think that's for me, if you ask me what the barriers are, it's actually people not recognising that when they close their door to disabled people, they're actually closing the door to their very own staff. So, I don't know, don't get me started on that. You can see the ranty voice coming in. So, yeah, I'll stop there.
I think the thing that I would add to that too is I think one of the barriers is around fear and this constant fear of getting it wrong. And people don't want to cause harm, they don't want to cause pain, they don't want to do the wrong thing. So the response to that is to not do anything. If we do nothing, we won't cause any harm. And actually, you cause a lot of harm by doing nothing, actually. So it's a big part of what AAV does is really steps organisations through that fear to kind of go, we are with you, we will hold your hand through this process, and the chances of you having that fear of getting it wrong, whatever that might be, is much greater in your head than it will be in reality. Because I think there's a huge, everyone knows why they need to change, everyone knows what even they need to do, but the big challenge is I think people are still concerned or not sure about how to do it and how to do it without causing harm. And yeah.
I think we just live in a risk-averse society. That's what the problem is, really. It's every. I mean, it isn't just this field; it's everywhere.
Other questions, comments? Erin. Great.
I guess this is aimed at previous leaders. What is one thing you wish you did or pushed harder on when you were leading AAV?
Ooh, good question. What? Sorry, I'll repeat it for those people that are online. What, for those of us that have been previous leaders, what is the one thing that we wish we'd pushed more on during our time?
Well, I think as the CEO that got into the most amount of trouble, I think I don't think I should have pushed it much more on anything. Well, look, you know what? I'm not particularly known for politeness, but I think I wished I had understood that we could ask for more money. And I wish I'd opposed the NDIS when it was first proposed. I mean, you know, not to bag the NDIS out entirely, I know that has delivered life-changing supports for people, but we had an amazing system in Victoria that the NDIS was modelled on, and I'm not sure that we gained as, you know, as a society, as a community. I really applaud and want to preserve the benefits for those individuals, but we lost all of our mental health arts services. We lost so many funded programs during this time of you know, transformation, and I think we knew that was going to happen, and we were vocal about it. I mean, we got all the mental health arts organisations together to petition the government around this, and some, you know, and some programs were retained, but the vast majority, I think 15 programs closed that had been operating, some for 30 years, and nothing has replaced those programs. So I wished that I had really fought more for that. Well, we did get put into the NDIS, Fiona. Thank you for mentioning that. And you know, we worked really hard. We worked hard for those reforms. But I feel like as a sector, we're the poorer. I mean, it's terrific. I think that Arts Access has been able to really retain that focus through the NDIS. But I'm not sure other organisations have. And for me, that's what you know, if there was one area that I wish I'd been stronger on, it would have been that.
I'm not sure that I could really answer that question. I mean, there are many, many things that I feel as though were left undone in some ways. Certainly in the early days, I wish I'd been a bit more savvy and determined about getting Arts Access financially secure and things like that. I mean, it was just very difficult times, but, you know, maybe, well, as it turned out, you know, after my time, luckily we got an executive officer who did it, you know, with the support of the board and involvement and things like that. But I think maybe that's one. But there was always, I guess, there was always more to do than you had the resources to do at any time. So yeah, more resources, thanks.
I think I'm sad that I didn't push Creative Victoria more to employ an agent for change to go into every one of their funded organisations, because that, I believe, is where the real change comes. And I still feel that that's something I never got to. So I think that's my one thing that I wish I'd done more or pushed more. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Samsara?
I'm just kind of a bit curious. I mean, there's always this thing about disability and arts for people with disability. Maybe is there a vision for AAV, maybe preceded in the past, for artists with disability to just work in the arts, not do disability art for people with disability? Like, is there a vision for how that might ever realise?
So is there a vision where disabled artists can just be artists, right? Some of you will know Sam Peterson, who is an amazing artist. And Sam, in a public space one day, said, as a disabled artist, I really look forward to just making art for art's sake. But at the moment, I've still got too much to say about disability, or too much needs to be said. And I am with you. I look forward to the day. And I think we can, and I think there are people that are doing that. I think there are disabled artists that are just making art and making amazing art, without disability being the kind of, has to be the topic. And I think we are moving away from that, hopefully. Other thoughts?
And also, I think I've already said this, but probably bears repeating. Actually, there are disabled artists working in arts organisations. Yeah. There are. This nonsense that they're not here and we have to go and find them is just rubbish. They're here. But the question that organisations need to ask themselves is, why don't they know who their people are? And why don't they know about, all the different ways that it's possible to be disabled, and how that can be celebrated in the context of an organisation and not have to be hidden because of prejudices.
Yeah. And fear of many things. If there is nothing else to add from the room, what I would like to ask is that you thank my brilliant panellists with great generosity. Thank you for sharing your candour so generously. It is a pleasure hanging out with you. You're welcome to stay here. We're now going to do a very exciting thing. Not that this hasn't been exciting, but we are going to announce this year's Stella Young Award winner, which is exciting. Everyone will know who Stella was. And for how many years has this been going? Since Stella died. So it's 10 years this year. It's Stella's 10-year anniversary this year. We're currently planning the party. You'll all be invited. So Stella Young Award, for those of you that don't know, has been running for the whole time, and was the brilliant idea, I think, Veronica, of yours, to harness the royalties from a series of articles and TV programs that had been captured. You could probably explain this far better than I can. But basically, AAV gets royalties from work that Stella did that was bequeathed to us. And so we then pass it on to other young emerging artists. So anyone between 18 and 30 can apply. And it's always an incredibly competitive process. And I would like to invite Artemis to come and join us, who was last year's Stella Young Award winner, to just kind of tell us how the last year's been for you and what have you been doing?
Does this cord stretch far enough? There we go. Hello, everyone. What I've been doing is a very long laundry list of things that you probably won't find super interesting. But I got asked a very similar question by Caroline out of the blue with no prep time a little over a week ago. And I rattled off like, I guess, maybe some of these opportunities I've had are because I've been given this award, and maybe some of these interactions I had are because I got given this award. And the truth is, I can't really quantify what in my life has happened because of this one thing, and what in my life has happened because of all the other things in my life. But once, being told that I was going to be asked this question again in front of people, I spent a bit more time reflecting. And I realized that last year was actually one of the hardest years of my life. I couldn't work for about 9 months last year. And I think the fact that I still have a career to come back to after that absence, and that I'm still respected both as an artist and as an advocate in this space, I guess is a testament to, I guess, the power of Stella's name, of the trust that the panel last year gave me in entrusting me with this award. And it's really nice to think that the people that have held this sector up in the past have my back, and as do the people who are doing so in the present. I'm hoping that I can be the same for everyone else into the future. Those are my off-the-cuff thoughts. But I'm really lucky to be in a position where I am come to for advice. I'm in a position where my art is getting to be shared with new people who hadn't seen it before. And I'm just really grateful for that, and I'm really grateful to pass on this little torch as well today.
Thank you, Artemis. Amazing. Thank you. So the deal with Stella Young is whoever wins from the previous year comes back and is part of the panel. So Artemis had it wasn't really tough, was it? I mean, it was tough because we had some amazing applications, but there was one person that was on all of our shortlists, and that person is the fabulous comedian, Madeline Stewart. And Madeline can't be with us today, but has sent a little video to all of us to introduce themselves to us.
Hello, I'm Madeline Stewart. I wish I could be with you, but I'm on tour in Darwin, and I'm not sorry to miss out on the Melbourne weather at all. It's 30 degrees and I am very happy to be here. However, I wish I was celebrating with all of you. I'm so thrilled to receive this award. I've always been so much of a fan of Stella and her work, and to follow her path that she laid so gently out for us as artists in the industry, especially as a comedian, I'm without words. I am so thankful for this award, and I wish I could be toasting with you. Oh, the magic.
So that is the fabulous Madeline Stewart. Madeline is a comedian. For those of you that don't know her work, she's amazing. And at some stage, no doubt, she will come and hopefully be in Melbourne, or check her out wherever she might be nearby you. Thank you, Artemis, for coming to be part of this. Thank you again to my panel. Thank you to everyone for coming. Please hang around and be with us. There is more food. Have a cup of tea. Just be here. So yeah, thanks everyone. Yes.
I'm just going to also repeat that for people online. I was congratulated on Digital Originals and the project Dismissible. Digital Originals is a program by SBS and Screen Australia to, I guess, develop short form series, narrative series. And yeah, I was lucky enough to be part of the team for Dismissible, which is a show about a disability beauty pageant and the tensions between two sisters, one able-bodied sister and one disabled sister, as they fight over whether to preserve this beauty pageant which was in their family's legacy. We were one of 10 groups that were brought to workshops in December last year, and then of those 10, 5 were given the opportunity for further development, and we were one of those 5. So yeah, that was really announced just a couple of days ago, and that's really big and exciting, and I really hope that this project gets made and that you'll get to see a bunch of silly little fun full of a whole cast of brilliant disabled people. But yeah, it's development right now, so we'll see what happens into the future. But yeah, that's been really cool.